So, did you know that Jesus is pro wealth building? He's pro wealth accumulation, even, you could say. Um, and, well, I don't have the exact chapter and verse as far as the actual reference. I can prove it. Basically, he said, don't store up stuff down here, but store up treasure in heaven. And I think that this I should have looked up some of the various references on this, but there were multiple instances, I believe, where he spoke about, um, you know, true treasure or true lasting riches in heaven. And so it's not that Jesus has a problem with wealth. It's not that he has a problem with building wealth. He, however, had a perspective on how short-term wealth is here. And so he knows the difference between short-term and long-term wealth. And long-term wealth is treasure you store up in heaven. Short-term wealth is treasure you store up down here. And furthermore, he was quite clear that the short-term, if you're too focused on the short-term wealth, it can impede your ability to get the long-term wealth. So if so that's a pretty big deal. So it'd kind of be like saying, all right, so let's use this illustration. So I'm sure there's flaws in this illustration, as with any illustration, but suppose you worked at you had the choice. Either you could work at a job that paid you $100,000 a year, and it would pay you exactly $100,000 every year until you retired. Your other option was to go in business for yourself. You would start out at $25,000 in profits the first year, but it would grow by 10% every year. So it would be 25,000 plus 10% of 25,000, and then the next year it'd be all of that plus 10% of that, and so on. So compounding 10%. By the time you retire, assuming a reasonably long career, we're talking a vastly more profitable career by going with the self-employed entrepreneurial route. And so that's one way to frame it. It's not apples for apples exactly, of course, but that is one way to frame it, which is, you could take the option of storing up wealth here on earth and have that be your primary thing, have your heart be locked on that, and then miss all of the eternal wealth. And not only do you miss out on the wealth if that happens, but you end up in hell. You're also in torment. You're not just not having money, you're also tormented. So, or I say money, you're not also just not having wealth, you're also in torment. So it is so easy for some of us, probably for me, to get, it's kind of like money is kind of like this shiny bait. It's like, ooh, if I had more of that, it'd be so awesome, it'd be so fun, it'd be so great, I could do so many things, and it'd be so awesome for my status, and it's just such a bunch of hockey puck, when you get to think about it. Now, am I saying you shouldn't be financially wealthy? That's great. If that's what God calls you to, then absolutely be wealthy. But it is such a fallacy to, or think about this: if for instance, let's say you could have $1,000 deposited into your bank account. Let's say you have $10,000 deposited into your bank account, starting when you're 20, every year, or you could have $5,000 deposited into your investment account every year. But if you chose the first option, you could not invest at all. And so in the short term, there's no, there's no immediate reward, right? Essentially you're starting out behind in your overall net worth, and only over time as interest, compounding interest and all that stuff happens. But in the end, the value of the investment would far outclass the value of your cash stock, your cash holdings. And that's a little bit of the perspective I feel like I want to have with the earthly wealth versus the kingdom, the heavenly eternal wealth, is I don't want to get caught up in the short-term wealth in a way that sabotages the long-term wealth. It's interesting in the parable of the sower that Jesus said that even the good soil, some of it produced 30-fold, some of it produced, I want to say it was 60, and some of it was 100. And it seems clear from the Bible that some of the reward levels really are different, and so it's interesting how carefully some of us can plan for retirement and how lax we can be about planning for what's after retirement. And when you think about the, so to speak, relative length, if such a thing exists, between the two, it's remarkable that we would be so careful about the one and so lackadaisical about the eternal.